It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Ho Ho Oh, our holiday special series, guys. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Project Potter. Guys, 25 straight nights of Christmas content, 25 straight nights of reviews. And tonight, guys, we are doing a very, very special movie, a Christmas classic and iconic movie, Bad Santa, guys. A very different movie. Morning, guys, if you're around the Christmas tree watching this with your family, full warning that this is going to be a not safe for work review because this movie is not safe for work. I'm not gonna hold back too much, and so this is your warning. If you got little Timmy, Susie, I guess, if they're around, go tell them to play upstairs. Go tell them to take out their Nintendo, take out their Game Boy. Wow, I sound like such an old person right now. We are going through Bad Santa. I'm going to give you my thoughts, my favorite character, my least favorite character, my score, and then the ho 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 rankings. So, guys, I think we're on night four, right? Because we've done just now. I'm just like thinking out loud. We've done Charlie Brown Christmas, Just Friends, Polar Express. So, guys, night four. As I do some math out loud to kind of check my work here. Bad Santa, guys, iconic movie, classic movie. I've grown up with this movie. I've seen this movie so many times. I love this movie, and I'm just gonna kind of start riffing off things, guys. And if you haven't seen Bad Santa, what are you doing? I mean, one of the best Christmas movies of all time, and like I said, a very, very different movie, an adult film, of course, not a porno, not a Christmas porno. Although there are elements of pornos in this film. Billy Bob Thornton, guys, iconic, classic character. This isn't the ho 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 jolly Saint Claus. This is alcoholic, down on his luck, scumbag, not necessarily a good dude. Santa Claus, not responsible. Yeah, just a kind of a degenerate. And it's Willie and as Santa, Billy Bob Thornton, and then Marcus is his little person friend or his elf, and they're like, don't call them midgets. They don't like to be called midgets. And he's like, I'm a dwarf. And it's so funny, guys. And there's so many lines that I'm not gonna remember for this review. And I'm gonna try and recite some of my favorite scenes and lines here, guys. So there's just so much good writing. John Ritter is in this movie, who plays like the kind of the supervisor who like reports to Bernie Mac's character, and he's like, you know. I was walking by the plus size women's changing room the other day, and I heard some sound, and he's like going into these wildly inappropriate situations, and he's like so afraid to like, tell Bernie Mac. He's like, so I heard him say you aren't gonna shit right for a week, and Bernie Mac is like, okay. He's like, what's wrong with that? He's like, he likes plus size women. And he's like man's a sexual being. He's like, and I wouldn't have it any other way. He's like, end of the human race. And he's like, right. It's just their interactions are hilarious, and Bernie Mac is hilarious as Jin. And then he obviously meets his demise at the end because Bernie Mac is actually the one who catches them. And, he says, different name, 7 different places. He's like, you guys change your name, different time. You fit the store Christmas Eve. And he's like, you know what? You're going to rob the store blind on Christmas Eve. And he's like, actually, what you should do is like, I want a piece of that. He's like, I don't care if you rob the store, give me half. And they're like, half. And he's like, okay, 30%. So he's just kind of like letting this continue. And so it's funny because like Willie is just like pissing his pants in front of the kids. He's showing up drunk. He's not showing up. He's swearing. And like in any other circumstance, he would be fired as Santa. But because Bernie Mac has a piece of the pie now, he's like gotta wait it out. So every time he messes up, he's like, oh my God. And he's like gotta figure out a way to explain it. So that's really like a nice twist there. And then obviously we have the twist with Marcus at the end where he turns on Billy Bob, and it's like, oh man, it's been a long time coming, and that was a twist I forgot about. The cream of the crop, guys, is Billy Bob as Santa, and just, I mean, the movie opens up where he's at the bar and he's just smoking like at the end of the bar, and he's like, "Can I get another drink?" And his suit is like he doesn't have his beard on, and his beard like falls off half the time, and he's just always messed up. And so funny when he goes to the mall, and the like normal Santa that's there, he's like, what, you're gonna hire some guy who's gonna do it for peanuts? And he's like, oh, just because he's got an actual midget there? And they're like, whoa, they don't like the word midget. Little people is what they want. And he's like, he's taking like advantage of his physical characteristics. And Bernie Mac is even like, yeah, I respect that. And it's funny because like basically Billy Bob will do it for cheap, and he's got Marcus with him. So It's like, why would you not hire them, So Billy Bob is there, and Marcus is great as the elf, where he's like, come on up, little kids. And he's like, tell Santa what you want. And Billy Bob is just like barely present, like super actually hammered out of his mind. And he just has like no bedside manner. And it's really funny because the kids will come up and he's like, what do you want? He doesn't even say like, tell Santa what you want for Christmas. He's just like, what do you want? And then the kid, like the first kid sneezes in his face and he's like, God damn. He's like, get out of my face. Shit. He's like snot and all that. And so funny. And then like, the different kids that come up and they're like, what do you want? This kid's like, Pokemon. He's like, cool. And then one kid is like, oh, Fraggle Star or whatever. And he's like, what the shit is that? He's like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, okay. And they're like, oh, new bike. And he's like, oh, real original. It's so funny. And obviously he's got like a demeanor to him where Billy Bob is just so good as his character. And it really is like an iconic role. And just every shot like of them in the parking lot with Marcus and Willie like walking through, and it's like it's funny because they're in Arizona too, where there's like absolutely no snow. So it's not like these other Christmas movies where it's like snowing and they have all this snow come around and like the environment's there and it's like, oh, it feels like Christmas. This is just like it's in Phoenix. They still celebrate Christmas, but there's no snow. It's way too hot. And so it's funny because like they're in like the worst place for Christmas, and he is like walking around in like probably scorching heat, and you see like the heat waves going through on the camera lens. That was a really nice effect. And he's walking around this Santa outfit, just straight up drinking out in public, throwing the bottle, and he opens the car door eventually, and all the bottles spill out. And Billy Bob is just completely, or Willie is just completely out of control, and it's hilarious. And he doesn't care. And he meets what's her name, Mrs. Claus's sister, as he says, and she's got like a Santa fetish, and it's just funny because every time they hook up, she's like, fuck me Santa, and it's really funny because she does it like every time, and she's like, yeah, it's just like a deep childhood like thing, like with Santa. And I'm like, that's hilarious that they added that in. But she's like really sweet, and she's like, I like you no matter what, even though he has like no redeeming qualities. And it's just nice. And it's like Billy Bob is such a great actor that we forget. Like he's like a good dude, but his character is so deplorable and despicable, and it's like he is just such a garbage person. But like he's so likable because Billy Bob just like sells that character, and you're like, it's weird because he's almost like an anti-hero, but you find yourself like rooting for him at the end, and you're like, okay. And I guess he does have a small little redemption at the end where he's like trying to get the toy to Thurman Merman. And guys, Thurman Merman, I mean, it's so funny because that kid is just incredible, and he's just such the perfect like iconic role. When you think of Bad Santa, you almost think of Thurman Merman more than you think of Billy Bob. But I'd say they go in tandem. I'd say the big three power characters, and it's funny because like obviously Thurman Merman being a child, like it's hard to consider him like it's not hard to consider him like a power character. It's unusual because usually it's like Billy Bob and you get Marcus in there. But then you get Thurman Merman. It's like those three are like, when you think of Bad Santa, you think of those three characters, and so they're so like integral to the plot. And it's just like we have Marcus's wife who's like scoping out the store every time, and she's like looking at stuff, and they're like, oh, can I help you? And she's like, no, I'm just looking. And then eventually they ask her if like they can help her, and she's like writing things down and stuff. So really, really just amazing stuff. But the dynamic between Thurman Merman and Willie is just amazing. And I love how there's just so many scenes where he just shows up, and then he's like, okay, he's waiting outside because he's like, first of all, he pulls his beard down, and he's like, it's not real. And he's like, well, no shit, kid. Of course it's not real. And he's like, what happened to your real beard? And he's like, well, I had one and then I got sick. And he's like, how did you get sick? And he's like, I loved a woman that was unclean. And he's like, oh, what happened? Was it Mrs. Claus? And he's like, Mrs. Claus? No. He's like, I was fucking her sister. And it's just really funny. And so their dynamic is great. And then like he needs a ride home. So he's like, look, I'm not your dada. He's like, I'm going to drive you home this one time. But he drives him home, and then he's like just staring at him the whole time. And he's asking all these questions like, how do the reindeer sleep? And he's like, what? He's like, through the noise from the workshop. And he's like, what? He's like, they only work during the day. And he's like, I thought it was always night at the North Pole. And he's like, well, right now it's always day. And he's like, why do you have to ask so many fucking questions? And it's just funny because he's like, oh, okay. And he's constantly asking questions. And there's this whole recurring bit where he's like, can I get you some sandwiches? And he's like, what the fuck is it with you and sandwiches? And the grandma says that all the time. And she's like so oblivious. And where he pulls up, and he's a huge house, and he's like, where's your dada? And he's like, oh, he's like backpacking through Europe or whatever. He's on an adventure, he says, for like a year and 3 months or whatever. And he's like, okay, what about your mom? And he's like, mom is with, Joseph and Mary. And so I think that's implying that the mom died. And so he's like, so who takes care of you? And he's like, Granny. And he goes, is Granny spry? And he goes, I don't know. And then he walks in, he goes, are you spry? It's so funny, but the grandmother was like obviously like so doesn't question it. Billy Bob walks in, or Willie, I should say, walks in with a ski mask, like clearly like a robber or a burglar. She doesn't even like care. She's like, let me fix you some sandwiches, and it's just so funny. And the whole thing is so ridiculous, but it works so well. And I just love that. They show Billy Bob or Will. I should stop saying Billy Bob. They show Willie like cracking the safe, and then like at the end they're like, oh, we can't crack the safe, and then Marcus is going to get the stuff, and it's funny because he like needs a golf club to get like the fur scarf or whatever, and it's just really really awesome. And I love the twist and Bernie's character, and everyone in this movie is so good. And this is just an amazing movie, and I'm sure there's stuff that I forgot, guys, but that is kind of the short end of just a fantastic movie overall. Okay, guys, my favorite character for this one, there's like I said, Willie, Marcus, Thurman Merman, and even Bernie Mac, and even John Ritter's character. They're all so good. That's like the power five. But really, the three, it's like the power three. But if I had to really narrow it down, dude, Billy Bob Thornton. This movie doesn't work with anyone else as Santa. So this movie is only so iconic and so good because Billy Bob does such an incredible job in this role. If there's like anyone else that's not really selling the role, then you're like, okay, well, this Santa is just an asshole. And it's like Billy Bob's character is an asshole, but there's just something about that like anti-hero, the antagonist, where it's like he's clearly a mess, like literally pissing his pants in front of the kids, and they're like, oh my God. And that hilarious scene where Bernie Mac is telling him to like, hey, take him out to the car. And he's like, I am a dwarf. He's like, I'm 3 fucking feet tall. How am I supposed to take him out? He's like, okay, Leonardo da Vinci, why don't you figure it out? And he's like, okay, thigh high, and it's so funny. And there's just the writing in this movie is so hilarious. But Billy Bob, dude, I absolutely iconic character. Like I said, when I think of Christmas movies, there's a couple that come to mind, and this is up there. And so different than like your classic Christmas movies. This is not a Christmas movie that you can watch around the family, but it's just so good. And like it's just a 2003 movie that is just so iconic. I had to rent this on Amazon for like $4, and it's like so funny because this movie is almost 20 years old at this point, and it's still not like on streaming services because it's almost like that premium tier quality where it's like, oh, I had to actually buy or rent this movie. So it's a little thing, but it just really speaks to its character. And yeah, this is like I want to say questionably the role of a lifetime, or one of Billy Bob's biggest roles, and he just absolutely nails it. And it's a different take on Santa, and I love it. And yeah, he's the best one in a very strong cast. Okay, guys, worst character or least favorite character for this one, because the main cast is so strong, as I mentioned. I think if I had to pick, because I don't want to do, I feel like all these reviews, I'm like, no one was bad, everyone was great, and it's like I don't want to do that. One of the weak points, I guess, quote unquote weak points of this movie, I guess would say the bullies, the group of bullies that beat up Thurman Merman, just because they're like super generic, like classic kid bullies. They all got backwards hats on, and he's calling them a fat ass, and they're dropping some R. There's a couple R bombs in this movie. So like this movie, it hasn't aged necessarily well in terms of dialogue for everything. Oh, guys, oh my God, sorry. Before I forget, I didn't even mention that scene where Willie's sitting at the bar and he looks across. He's looking at everyone. It's all like couples having a good time and people on dates. And then there's this one guy that's just like staring at him, and it like pans, and then it like pans back, and he like looks back, and he's like, "What's going on?" And it's just guy that's just like got his drink, and he's just looking at him with like disgust. And it's really funny, and it's so random, but like he thinks that Willie and Marcus are like having sex with each other. So he like comes up to him at the end or in the parking lot, and that's when Thurman Merman saves him. But he comes up to him and he's like, I am not gay. And he's like, what? He's like, are you off your fucking meds or something? And he's like, yeah, but that's not the point. And he says like, okay, faggot claws. And he's like, ass clown. And it's so funny because he's like pushing Billy Bob, and then Thurman Merman comes over and he's like, leave Santa alone. And he just like, it's so funny because we never see that guy again. And we're like, what prompted this? But it's just funny because that's like, I feel like a really famous scene that comes out, and like I all the time I'll just be like talking to my family, and like I'm like ass clown, and it's just really funny. So I didn't want to forget that scene, guys. Eventually Willie goes and gets his revenge by just punching a child in the face repeatedly, but only after he punched Thurman Merman. And he said like, "Oh, you like giving little kids black eyes?" And it's funny because it's like a nice. It's obviously like you never want an adult punching a child, but like it's like a nice scene. And then even afterwards, Willie says like, I think it's like right after he. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. He's sitting in the car about to kill himself. He's written his suicide note, and he's sitting in the car in the garage, and he's like gonna fumigate himself or whatever, if whatever it's called. He's gonna kill himself in the garage, and then Thurman Merman just happens to come over and be like, "What are you doing?" And then he's like, "Ugh." He's like, "Nothing." He's like, "Here, give this note to the police or whatever." And then he's like, "Wait, what happened to your eye?" And then that's when he goes and punches a kid. And then afterwards, Willie says, like, I did something good today, and it made me feel really like good, like I had purpose. And it's funny because Thurman Merman like saves his life in that sense. And then he like starts to figure out like it's a really dark way to kind of like find your purpose, but it's funny. But yeah, sorry guys, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but that's just because this movie is so good. But the bully group, I would say, if I had to pick a worst character, at least interesting group of characters, would be the bully group, just because of how generic they are. Okay, guys, that brings us to the score. This is a 9.7. This is an incredible movie. The only reason I'm holding off from giving this one a 10, guys, I felt the runtime a little bit in this movie. It's like an hour and a half, which is fine, especially for a comedy. But they kind of retreaded a little bit, like, okay, we get Willie's character, and he's a degenerate and a drunk, and he can't get his shit together, and he's pissing himself and everything in front of the kids. But then they did that a couple times, and I was like, okay, the novelty wore off a little bit. And the writing is so good, and the interactions between Thurman and Willie is so good, and Willie and Marcus and John Ritter's character and Bernie Mac and stuff. But they focused on Willie's character a little too much in terms of like being an absolute mess. Like, okay, I was like, I get it. And then it seems like they had a little bit of time. Like, if this movie was like maybe 25 minutes shorter, I think it would have been great. And I think well, it is great. Sorry. I think it would have been a little bit tighter. It would have been like an absolute perfect movie, I think, if they just tightened it up a little bit. And I've gone on and on about how great this movie is, and the score reflects that. But other than that, guys, it is a very, very, very good movie. It's fantastic. The plot is a little loose sometimes, where he like is going back to his motel, and then there's like a guy there's a guy in his like motel looking for stuff, and I think it's Bernie Mac's character, but that's never really explained. But he did figure them out, so it's probably that. But it's weird because we don't really like get clarity on that. Obviously, like him just staying with the grandma in their house is really funny. The whole scene I didn't even mention, guys, the wooden pickle, where he goes, it's a wooden pickle. And Thurman Merman walks in as, what's her name's character, the girl he's sleeping with, I forget her name. She's got like literally like edible panties on, and he's like, he walks in, and when she's like in her bra on the bed, and they're like clearly about to like hook up, and Thurman Merman just walks in, and she goes, "Hello, little boy." And then he's like, he turns around, faces him, and he's got her panties in his mouth, and it's just so funny. And then he's like, "Oh, I got you a gift." And he's like, "What is it?" And he's like, "It's a wooden pickle." And he's like, "Okay, why'd you color it brown?" And he's like, "I didn't." He's like, "That's my blood that I got when I made it to you." And that's when he's got like the huge cut on his hand. That scene where like Willie passes out, and then it's just Thurman Merman screaming, and he like wakes up, and he's like, "What the fuck is going on?" And then he's like, "Oh, I cut myself by accident." We're like, how did he do that? But then we find out later. But that's really funny because he like, just has a deep cut, and like Billy's taking care of it, or I should stop calling Billy. Willie's taking care of it. But yeah, guys, just so many awesome scenes. The twist with Marcus at the end, where they kill Bernie Mac's character, Jin, I should say. They kill him. They're like, oh, so that makes sense. And it's like, okay. And then it's funny because even the way he dies, they're like, they try and hit him with a car, and then she's like, "I didn't get enough speed. I need a running start." And they're like, "Is he dead?" And he's like, "Nah, he's got some broken ribs." And then they're like, "All right." And then they like try and like, I think spark like blow him up or like electrocute him with the jumper cables, but then that doesn't work. They're like, all right, so they like drag his body over, and she's like, all right, they put his head behind the tire. Here he goes, just put it in reverse. And it's just really funny the way that's handled. But that twist, and then the twist of him turning on Willie at the end, I did not remember, so that was good. The scenes, guys, I didn't even mention. the opening of the alarm scene where they're like, all right, and it goes to set arm the system, and it's like 30-second countdown, and then Marcus is like in the little snowman, little frosty outfit, and then he starts running, and he like goes down the escalator between and just slides down, and then he like gets the mannequin hand and hits it like at the last second. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was clever. Just a great movie, a little too long, and the plot is sometimes wavers a little bit, and there's like a little too much time spent on certain things, and you're like, you gotta overlook some things, but overall, just an amazing movie and just really, really, really great. Okay, guys, that brings us to the Ho Ho Oh rankings. I'm sure you guys could tell from the beginning of this portion, the beginning of this review, that this one goes at number one, easy. This is going to be tough to beat, honestly. It's really, really great. Despite its small flaws, like I said, a little bit too long. Sometimes the plot is a little good. It's iconic, dude. It's so good. I mean, there's just so many shots with Willie and Marcus, and like I said, John Ritter and Bernie Mac, and I know I keep mentioning the same things, but even Willie's girlfriend, she plays great with him, and I love how she's just like a bartender, and then he's like kind of going around, sleeping with these different women, and he actually likes her, and she, despite all of his flaws and really doesn't have many redeemable qualities, she's like, I like you no matter what, and that's really sweet. And then he cares for Thurman, and then she's like, oh well, you like, that was so sweet, and you like care for him and stuff. And we get the scene at the end where he gets shot like 8 times, and he's trying to just get him the pink elephant or whatever that he asked for. And then we are like, oh no, he goes out in like a fit of glory. And then at the end, he reads the letter, and he's like, oh, actually, I got 8 bullets in me. And he's like, none of them hit my organs except for my liver, which was fucked already. And he's like, oh, and not to mention now I go around and show you how like corrupt cops are for shooting an unarmed Santa Claus. And it's just funny, and it's just really, really well written. And then they give Thurman Merman the shirt at the end, the iconic shirt where he's cleaning up his blood out front, and it says "Shit happens when you party naked," and it's just, what a movie, dude. And this one goes at number one easily. So we got number one, Bad Santa, the new number one. Then we got Just Friends. Then we got Polar Express, and then we got Charlie Brown Christmas. So those are how our Ho Ho Oh rankings shape up through 4 movies. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's another episode of Ho Ho Oh, Another Night in the Book Skies. A really good one. Go watch this movie if you haven't. Hopefully, you're not watching this review before you watch a movie. But what do you guys think of this movie? Are you as high on it as me? I know it's like pretty much universally beloved, but let me know if you don't like this movie, if you disagree with me, if you agree, things I missed that you like. Let me know, guys. Appreciate you stopping by. Like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, guys, peace.